The debt payments of the US government are continuously increasing. They are officially impossible to pay back in full. The question you need to ask yourself is, who is the interest owed to? You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to look at the impossible debt scenario. Let's begin with this. 1970 to 2025, federal debt versus interest payments. And it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that as the debt increases, so do the interest payments. And they have now become impossible to ever pay back. You can see here where this has escalated to, the blue line being interest payments. Quite frankly, $1.2 trillion. It's not a likely scenario. But again, who does the US owe it to? And you can say that they owe it to China. Maybe they owe it to Japan. But I would present an alternative, and that is the Fed. The Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States, and so they issue the currency. In issuing the currency, it is born out of debt. It is loaned out to the US government at interest. And that interest eventually must make its way back to the Fed. You may hear differently, that that's not the case. But I beg to differ. The central bank of any country issues its currency at interest. Surely the interest may be low as it is now, but ultimately that interest must make its way back into the hands of the central bank. And of course, because of the design of the system, it is literally impossible to ever pay back. US federal debt to US debt to GDP. Obviously, we have a very big problem on our hands with the debt continuing to soar year after year, decade after decade, and now at 105% debt to GDP ratio, clearly in no man's land. And that doesn't even include all the unfunded liabilities. That's the garbage numbers that we see provided by the government. Annual GDP, quote, growth minus annual deficit incurred. An interesting chart to take a look at here, because you can see that when you subtract the annual deficit incurred, you get a different picture. No longer does that GDP growth look so substantial. You can see all the red that has been happening here year after year into the projected years ahead of us. Look at this. Credit card debt versus the real DPI. So we are seeing here our disposable income essentially compared with our credit card debt. And there is an extreme escalation, particularly from 2009 to 2010, financial crisis timeframe. People are excessively indebted, particularly with credit card debt, student debt, auto loans, mortgages. And we are not talking small amounts. These are excessive. People take out not just one credit card, they take out as many as they can get. 3 credit cards, 5, 10 credit cards, all of the different companies. If you go to the big box stores, you can go to Walmart and Best Buy and everything else, and you can get a credit card for each of those. Surely the interest rates are going to be unbelievably high, but people believe that they will be able to pay it back right away. Oh, don't worry about it. I don't need to worry about the interest. I'm going to pay it back next month. And next month comes around, and unfortunately, they cannot pay it back. And then it snowballs. It gets worse and worse and worse. Real savings as a percentage of the disposable income, and you will see this here, savings are essentially non-existent. Why would people save when they can put money into something that will make them a profit? Maybe they'll, invest in stocks. Maybe they'll invest in bonds. Maybe they'll try something fancier, something with more risk. But ultimately, they want more money. That's the goal. More money. And by saving your money, they're not seeing the interest in that. No pun intended. There is no interest at this time. You leave your money in the bank, you don't get any money back. In a time of, let's say normal time, we would have the ability to actually make money simply by leaving our money in a bank account. It would provide a return. Can you believe it? I know it seems like so many years since that's actually happened, but it's true. That really did happen. You would get money back. Today, though, you're going to get nothing. Look at this. Existing home sales, biggest year-over-year decline since 2014. So you'll see those levels here. And it shows us that right now, we've got a little problem on our hands. Growth in the per capita disposable personal income compared to inflation. I thought this was an interesting chart here. You can see it for yourself. On the way up, they're correlated, and on the way down. And this is going back from 1952, according to this chart. Complete correlation. It's quite interesting that if we would have this, even though it's not very accurate, but the CPI, if the inflation was present in the right areas, like wages, and not in something like food inflation, then we wouldn't have as big of a problem. But that's not the way it works. We don't get the benefit from all of this. Now, to change gears for a second here, before we finish it off, ECB pulls the plug on Latvia's failing ABLV bank. So here are the bank failures. Yet again, we saw it in Italy, Spain, Greece. These banks have to be taken over by the government, or they need to basically go in and quote unquote restructure debt. And that's not a good thing, obviously, for the people who have their money in these institutions, for the government, for those who have to bail it out, for everybody. The people who work at these companies, of course. Latvia's ABLV bank is failing or likely to fail and will be wound up as saving in it is not in the public's interest. Wow. Accused by US authorities of some nefarious acts, and they said, we're having a little problem and the best thing to do is close up shop. Privately held ABLV, Latvia's third biggest bank, has encountered some issues. All right. Due to the significant deterioration of its liquidity, the bank is unable to pay its debts or other liabilities as they fall due. The bank did not have sufficient funds which are immediately available to withstand stressed outflows of deposits before the payout procedure of the Latvian Deposit Guarantee Fund starts. They couldn't pay their debt. The bank is being shut down. You can't pay your debts, they'll shut you down. Where has all the money gone? Think about this. All other institutions out there who also can't actually pay back anything, can't fill any shortfalls if people start to move their money out of the system. Maybe they don't trust it anymore. Maybe they find better opportunities elsewhere. And the bank gets more and more stressed, and it can't handle it. It absolutely cannot handle it. And yet today, we see this very precarious scenario put in front of us. Not just this Latvian bank, but look how many times this has happened. All sorts of financial institutions, whether you want to look at the UK, the US, Greece, Spain, Italy, Iceland, all of these countries and more encountered some sort of crisis. Institutions failed, or they needed to be nationalized, or they needed to be bailed out. And we have a very, very big problem. The government can't be there to bail us out. The deposit insurance can never bail us out. We know that. They have 1% or less of the funds needed to actually bail out the bank. So surely they can't. We have to rely on central banks. And what do central banks do? They print money. When the time comes, they will destroy the currency. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. And last but not least, if you found the video informative, I know that you will find my books, The Money GPS, and my newer release, Global Economic Collapse, even more informative. You can actually flip through these books. If you go over to Amazon, there's a look inside feature. It's going to allow you to flip through the pages of these books to see if you like them. Take care.